Welcome to What's in the Box episodes of horror with Donna and Eric. I'm Donna,
And I'm Eric.
and today we are continuing our werewolf theme with The Wolf's Hour by Robert McCammon. So I just put up the one of the covers here on the screen.
Yeah, let's see. If you go back one, I think that's the second
Oh
one I
yeah,
sent. Yeah,
sorry.
this one right
There we go.
here, that's the one I have.
Yeah, that's the one I have as well.
And okay, so let's get it out in the open right away. Um, this isn't a horror novel at all.
No, it's not.
And so um and I have no problem with that. But this is the first time we've read something where I'm like 100% we didn't read a horror novel, and I know that it was probably sold that way because that's what he writes, is horror novels. So
Yeah.
I I liked it. I like the book a lot. I think it's a great book, but it's not a horror novel, and I um I think it could have been a lot shorter.
Yeah. I personally think now I liked it as well. Um, but it didn't blow me away like I was
No.
expecting. And I almost feel like it's two separate stories.
Yes. In fact, what I feel like is, to justify being a horror novel, they wasted 200 plus pages telling us how he became a werewolf.
Right,
And even none of that is horror.
right.
That's just a coming of age story that has to
Mm,
do with just nothing.
yeah,
So if they could have cut all that out and just given us the other part, then we have an amazing action adventure spy thriller
yep.
that would have been amazing. It just would have been fun. It would have been a fun story to read.
Hmm.
You never needed him to be a werewolf. In fact, being a werewolf was a convenient out for the writer.
Yeah,
He used it when he needed to come up with a way to get him out of situations. The only way that I thought this would have been a better and a true horror story is if the berserker makes it to the end and is a Nazi.
hmm,
And then you have a final confrontation of the berserker, who at that point then would have slaughtered his entire family. And then he has the
right,
coming, the crescendo of the story is him not only defeating the Nazis, but then defeating the berserker. But they stole that from us so early in the
yeah,
story that I'm like, well, let's, because I mean, I was like, man, this is setting up for an amazing fight when he finally learns how to be a werewolf. And
right.
it's not even a real werewolf. That's the thing that I found frustrating after reading The Howling, and what was the other one we read? Cycle of the Werewolf.
Yeah.
And have we done one other one, or are those the only two we've done?
No, I think those are the only two books because we did
Yeah,
the Dog
because then Dog
Soldiers. Yeah,
Soldiers. So okay, well, even that a perfect idea, because the reason we did Dog Soldiers, one, to get the book, but also because it was a representation of what we were about to read.
right.
Soldiers, and actually, and it's kind of not, because they were just werewolves and the other side was soldiers. But every representation of a werewolf that we've had up until this book has been this horrific, gigantic, powerful monster.
Yep.
And in this one, we get a guy who gets hairy
Yeah.
and then turns into a dog, which is fine. I don't even have a problem with him becoming a wolf. I mean, but he's not a werewolf. This cover is a misrepresentation of what goes on. He
Yeah.
doesn't do that. If he could have harnessed it, and I know occasionally he turns his hands into claws and does stuff,
Hmm.
but that's not the same. We're not talking
Yeah.
the same thing. As a
Nope.
Soviet, as a Allies versus Nazis story, I really did enjoy it. I thought it
Yeah.
was, it was well written. Problem is that it was fresh in '89, and we read it in 2023,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And
not as fresh.
yeah, I just was expecting more wolf action
Yeah,
in the I'll just say the present part of it where he's Michael instead of Mikhail.
they and
Um,
they definitely foreshadowed that
yeah,
by the American and the British military coming to his house.
yep,
And they made it seem like, even that guy tongue in cheek talking about him being a werewolf, knowing he's a werewolf.
yeah,
And yet I guess we should have known though, because they foreshadowed that with the beginning, which I thought was so unnecessarily long, of him
Hmm.
stealing the paperwork and then going to the countess and then having her die. And there's another thing, he fights that guy off. I know. I guess he kills that guy, the assassin,
Yep.
and then he wants to get revenge on the hunter who set it all up. But
Right.
at any point, you needed another werewolf
Hmm.
so that we had a back and forth. Otherwise, it's just, and it ended up being a very good story. It
Yeah.
was a back and forth. It was a back and forth between an ally soldier and the Nazi regime.
Right.
And so you're totally right. It was a misrepresentation, this entire thing. Now, I'm not going to hold it against him because I think it's a well written book. And maybe he just wanted to write a Nazi, ally story. And
Yeah.
he knew that he needed to have a horrific element. And then he just doesn't, you know, enough to get the cover done. And then that's it.
Yeah.
So,
I kept getting, I'll just say I was bummed out because I'd get really into the Michael Gallatin storyline of him being an ally soldier. And then it would flash back to when he's McHale in the past as a kid. And then I would like, oh, I was really enjoying that storyline, but now we're back here. But then I'd really enjoyed the storyline of McHale,
and you know
and
who
I
we
would,
could blame? We can blame the editors for that because this
yeah.
became a big thing in the 80s where they do this cutaway
Oh, really?
and
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, older books, if this would have been written in the 60s, it might have started then. But, if you read Tolkien's straight up. You get one story and then he goes to the next one story.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that wrote that way. But it's like they had to have 1,000 cliffhangers in this book, which, is
Hmm.
fine. But you're right. You've invested. You start to go, okay, we're getting some momentum with this character. And then all of a sudden we're back. And the problem is, and this is the problem, is that we didn't care enough about that time.
Right.
We are invested in the Michael story. The McKell story is filler.
Yeah, I think for me personally, it would have flowed better if it would have started off as him being McHale and then flowed organically from him being a little kid and then, meeting with the werewolf pack and then his transition into Michael. I think
Unfortunately,
from
though, that's a totally different story.
exactly, exactly.
Because by the time we get to the story he wants to tell, which is Michael and Operation Iron Fist, Michael's already established as a werewolf. And you're
Yeah.
right, the more interesting stories might be what led him to that point, and maybe we get more werewolf action. But I think part of the reason that it's not horrific or in our eyes is because he's a good guy
Hmm.
and he's not using his power to do anything other than defeat the Nazis. And how can anybody be against that? So it's
Right.
like there's nothing horrific about the horrific elements of this novel are the Nazis and the way they
Hmm.
are.
Yep.
But I didn't need a werewolf in the middle of that to know or to be disgusted by what Block was doing or Boots or any of the other idiots that they had on that side. The other thing I thought is he did write everybody very stereotypically, you know, like if we were watching a movie in the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
It felt like very Raiders of the Lost Ark
Hmm.
when it came
I
to the characterization of the Nazis and stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I kept waiting for him to like become a werewolf and like fight the Nazis as a werewolf, but he kept saying, "Oh, now is not the time to let the wolf out."
Right.
Um,
Which I
and
get.
it's
You don't want
yeah,
anybody to know because he learned what happens when people find out you're a werewolf. They wipe out
right,
your family.
yeah. So then I kept getting, there was only like little glimpses, like you said, he would turn his hand into the claws, or I think on the part with the train where he was on that train, the booby trap train there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That.
think he turned his hand into a claw, and then there was the when he was breaking out of the concentration camp, he like used his wolf speed to catch up with them as they were escaping.
Yeah, and his senses too, because there's no way he was going to be able to find them
Yeah,
hidden, and so he smelled them out. And then,
yeah,
then she's like, I thought that was kind of funny too, though. She's all like, "Well, I'm going to go with werewolf.
yeah,
You must be a werewolf." It's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I get it, but I mean, I would think that, but that's because I've got so much pop culture nonsense in my head. So I
Hmm.
will immediately jump to aliens and werewolves and vampires and ignore any common
Right.
sense thing. But it's the 40s. They're not
Yeah.
thinking werewolves. There's not a
Right.
big werewolf, you know, history or anything. I guess the Wolfman would have came out what in 41. So maybe, maybe that's, but I don't know because I don't think so. Because I don't think that would have been, wouldn't have been in the time frame. So there shouldn't even been a Wolfman, and he's not even a Wolfman. That's the other problem.
Yeah.
I wanted werewolf guy holding a machine gun, going crazy.
Yeah.
Let's have some fun with it, which is kind of another poison pill from Hollywood because we do get a lot of fun. When they did like Grindhouse, they did a werewolf Nazis, thing, and then werewolves were dressed up as Nazis, and so you can characterize them as evil and bad and whatever. But this is a totally different animal,
Yeah.
and and I enjoyed. I didn't feel like I was slogging through this. I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the ride, but I noted. I know. I mean, I can say that I felt like, as well written as it was, I didn't need any of the McKell stuff
Yep.
to understand what was going on with the Michael storyline, but I understand why he did it. And we're looking at a time period where all books are this size. So, it didn't feel like they would trim the fat, but we wouldn't, they wanted to make sure, I guess, that they were full.
Right. And I kept being like, oh gosh, when these people cut a break because he keeps getting beaten up. And then when they were on the island, I forget her name, the woman, she like broke her ankle or something, or her ankle, she got shot in the ankle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, can they like cut a break? Oh, and then when he got captured and he's in the concentration camp and like, you
Yeah,
know,
there was a lot of was
just
it
when you think the story is getting momentum and you're like, okay, we're getting to the climax of the story, and then you're like, oh, and now he's beat up and he's got to recover, you know?
yeah, I'm trying to look and see. Was her name Cindy or was it Kathy? It was
Um,
something that's
yeah,
annoying. We should have all this.
yeah, she was Chestnut Van Dorn.
Yeah.
That was the actress's
Goldilocks, as the
Goldilocks.
Russian would
Yeah,
call her.
yeah.
Yeah, I
I
just
loved Lazarus.
yeah, he was
I
a fun
love that
character.
character. I loved him so much. I'm like, I am so mad that we didn't get a lot of him in this book. Like he was like, we didn't meet
But
him
see,
until he was at the concentration camp, you
right, but
know?
I think we love him because we didn't get too much of him. You know what I
Mm,
mean?
yeah.
Like it's one of those things where he could have easily overdone it with that character, but he gave us
Hmm.
just I thought a good amount of it. I mean, a little
Yeah.
bit more for sure, because we could have had him earlier. I didn't, Mouse is fine. Okay, here's the thing that I had the biggest problem with. And maybe it's just a reflection of what happened to him when he was Mikhail, but he abandoned everything when they Russians take over their house and start shooting everybody, and they're turned into the wolves, and so they have
Hmm.
to run away. He leaves his kid. He leaves his basically his wife. Whatever relationship that was. He
Yeah.
leaves everything but the main guy. Him and the main guy run away, and he does it with barely any hesitation. And then as a human, and maybe this is why he's like this as a human, but as a human, he will not, oh, we can't leave Mouse behind, we can't leave her behind, I can't leave this done, everything. He had to constantly go back and put everybody in danger, jeopardize the mission all the time, trying to
Hmm.
save the people and then I go back and I think he just left his kid right there.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. He left his kid right there. And I thought, well, maybe
Hmm.
that's it. Maybe we'll see him at the end. Maybe he'll have been captured,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. I mean, at that point, he would have been captured by the Soviets. So I don't know how
Yeah.
you get him to be the other. But, Winter Soldier was an American and he became a Cold War operative. So I'm sure he could have come up with something.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I thought it was a fun. I mean, it's like I think of it just like I would think of if I was reading James Rowland early stuff,
Yep.
or it's a very good tight thriller. Robert Harris, I could see that. Or I'm trying to think, there's one writer that's David Morrell.
Hmm.
You know, it's he easily could have fallen in that. And I think the problem is he wrote this after he was already popular as a horror writer,
Right.
and we can see
Yeah.
it on the cover. It says best-selling author of Stinger and Swan Song,
Yep.
and so, you know, I guess we're not. He's not allowed to branch out, and I see why he wouldn't. You know, you want to keep your fans and all that stuff, but this isn't
Yeah.
this isn't this is not a horror novel. I'm not
No.
even sure this is a werewolf novel, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
I
got way
don't.
more werewolf action when he was younger as he becomes a werewolf. But I mean, really, it seemed more like, you know, for lack of a better, it's like he was overcoming a handicap. It's almost as if being a werewolf was the handicap,
Right.
and then we learn how he overcame it, and then he doesn't rely on it, especially when it's like very important. You know,
Hmm.
and again, I don't know. Like I said, I felt like the writer used it as a device to get out of trouble more
Right.
than he used it as a reason for us to be impressed that the guy's a werewolf. And
Yeah.
so, but I did enjoy it. And like I said, I know it took me forever to read it because I had so much going on, and the book feels like it's 1,000 pages. But um, I was always excited to get back to the story, and I you know, I mean, I had questions, and I would be kind of like, well, but it wasn't to the point where I felt like I need to put the book down.
Right.
I'm 100% interested in reading all the other stuff. I know you bought a lot, you know,
Yeah.
so that you got.
Yeah.
I've been slowly collecting his stuff at half price bookstores and stuff like that when I could find them. I ended up having to buy this one online.
Yeah. I
Lucky.
ended up. I was actually searching specifically for this book.
Oh yeah, I got super excited when I saw it listed, and I thought, oh, I got to
Yeah.
get it. And, you know, it was the first one I could grab
Yeah.
from
So
Anna.
I ended up getting a lot of his books. I think there was like 6 books in the lot. Um, and I spent way more money than I wanted to.
Yeah,
Because
isn't
I'm
that how it
thinking,
always is?
yeah, and I'm like, okay, it was 5 or 6 books. I can't remember I think um mine was in the lot, not Swan Song, because I actually had that prior. Um, I honestly can't remember the other titles. Anyways, this was my first McCammon that I've ever read, and I wasn't blown away. And you know, when I bought them, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have these vintage horror books, and these, everybody loves a McCammon. They can't, say enough nice things about it. And I'm like, I'm
Every
just,
single person that I told that we were doing this told me this is like the best book. They love
yeah,
this book. They're just gushing over. And so maybe
yeah,
we had very high expectations going into it,
maybe,
but I
maybe,
liked it. Like I said, I
yeah,
just don't think it's a horror novel.
yeah. I enjoyed it
I think
as
it's a
well.
well written. I think, you know what he did? He proved to me he can write a very compelling story.
Hmm.
I did, even though I feel like there's a lot of filler because of the second storyline. But you know, both of them, if they were separated, you know, you could see how both of them would work very well. And so I'm
Yeah,
excited to see what Swan Song's like, and get Stinger, and I think I have Ball and Night Ship, if that's one,
yeah,
which is another Nazi one. So you know, he obviously started early on,
yep,
showing us that yeah, he's very interested in this time period. And I know he's got a series where I think he focuses on a historical character, maybe
yeah. I
set
can't
in like
remember. I
the.
found out that though there's a second book to this.
Yeah, I know. I noticed it's a collection of short stories,
Yeah, yeah.
so
So
it's
I'm
not.
like,
When I saw that it was when I originally saw the thing, I thought, oh, you know, I'm not sure there was enough here for a full length sequel unless you're going to werewolf it out. But
yeah,
we already know he doesn't do that. So then I was
hmm,
like, okay. But then I saw it was short stories, and I thought, okay, I could see that because now he can jump around and he can give us even more so than he did in this first one. He could really go back and show us what happened to him. How did he become a British citizen? What did he do to leave Russia? All that kind of stuff.
right,
And so that would be
yeah,
interesting. And then also just anytime he does you know, you can do very limit the words, and then you've got a chance for a very quick action packed story where he's doing a mission as the
hmm,
wolf, and maybe we get more wolf action.
yeah,
I'm not gonna hunt it down though. I'm not gonna go crazy
yeah.
and
Me
look
neither.
for it. What
Yeah,
I probably end up doing like is, you know, when we get to the point where we're reading some of the epics like The Stand, or you know, these coming of age ones, maybe then we throw Swan Song in there and we check it out and see, because a lot of people think that's that's that his best book or whatever. But
Yeah. Yeah. And I found myself kind of, even though I was enjoying the stories, and I'm going to say stories because I consider them two different
mhm.
stories. Um, in the Michael Gallatin story, I became annoyed with the fact that it wasn't written with metric. And I know that's going to sound annoying. So when the American and the other guy are in the pub, in the Welsh pub, looking for directions to Michael's house, the bartender says, "Oh, it's a few miles." Her actual dialogue says it's a few miles away instead of kilometers. And that kind of just threw me out of the setting of the book. Like, I know McCammon is American, I guess. Um, so like having him write miles and pounds and inches in non-dialogue parts made sense, but when the people were talking, when it was actual dialogue and they were, you know, 99% of the characters were either Welsh, British, Russian, German, right? There was only like one American, one or two Americans characters,
Yeah.
but they weren't using the metric system, and it kind of just threw me. And I don't know if I was just being nitpicky at that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's almost digging for an issue.
Yeah,
But the character you're talking about was mocking the American the entire time. So we could maybe see it as maybe that's what she's doing.
yeah,
Maybe she's using his as if he isn't smart enough to do the other stuff,
right.
because she made fun of him, gave him the drink that almost killed him,
Yep.
and she was pretty smart alecky with him. But
Yeah,
yeah, I don't even I didn't even notice it. So
yeah,
it could very well be. I don't. That's one of those things that I wouldn't even. I get it, because when I'm writing, I would have looked up everything and I would have had him say the stuff right. But when I'm reading, for some reason, it didn't bother me at all. But I didn't like the characterization of the American. I can tell you that.
mm,
He really went over the top with making that guy an ass,
yeah,
which obviously, when we're always seen that way. I always think that's funny how we're seen that way.
yeah. Another part that I actually was really excited about was when they were on the island and there was the wolves.
Mhm.
I was like, oh man, Michael's gonna like,
Lead
that's
a
another part.
charge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's gonna like lead these wolves into battle, and they're gonna like fight off these Nazis and they're gonna come to his rescue. Um, but that didn't happen, and I'm like,
And
oh man.
that would have been a fantastic story. That would have been like a fantastical thing. And we would have been like, it would have been perfect fantasy, science fiction, horror thing to happen. But
Yeah,
he's so grounded in reality for 90% of this thing,
yeah,
that it's like he couldn't even think outside the box to do that. Like he wasn't going, it's like he thought just having the werewolf was enough. And then he
right.
was not going to go anywhere else. And
Mm,
like I said, they don't even have the werewolves acting like werewolves.
yep,
They acted just like a wolf would,
mm,
I mean, we're not, and I get that too. I mean, you do have that kind of thought, but you know, when I'm thinking of a soldier that turns into a werewolf, I'm thinking the guy from The Howling
yep,
in a bulletproof vest or something.
mm-hmm.
So, but
Yeah,
I think
and
that
then
he missed out. I mean, I do. I think there are, and maybe part of the problem of that is that we've read a ton of stuff up to this point that has more fantastical elements to it, so that maybe that's what we're looking for.
yeah,
So we're taken back a little bit when I mean, if I told you that if I called this, say, like, the vampire's hour, then we would expect the vampire turning into smoke, drinking blood, really strong, flying, maybe transforming. And then if the whole book, the guy didn't do anything except for run around and avoid sunlight, then we would have been like, hey, this is kind of not what we were promised with the cover and the title and stuff.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And then when he got injured on the island and he was kind of like becoming a wolf. Like, do you remember that section where
Hmm.
he was
He
kind of
got
like
shot in the head,
losing.
and
Yeah,
he loses himself, and they think he's been gone for weeks, right? 10 days or something.
yeah,
So for 10 days, he's been part of the wolf pack, and it didn't seem like he was gonna, unless he healed up pretty quick. He was accepted, but he wasn't the leader.
no,
So
no. Which is funny because when the story with McHale, none of those wolves healed.
yeah, that's the other thing that he could have easily taken. Now, if you're going to take something for convenience sake, then take the transformation healing your character,
Yeah.
and then we can at least get through some of the nonsense. But yeah, he didn't do any of that. He let, the one guy doesn't have a leg.
Mm,
Um,
and I was expecting his leg to grow back.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was like, oh,
especially, because he transformed more than once, so you would think it would. And, the other guy lost his eye, I think. And uh, I was surprised at how easily they were to kill,
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I get that. So I guess his idea of a werewolf is the dude could turn into a wolf and that's all he wanted to use. But
Yeah,
again, then I guess that doesn't really do anything when you're trying to do the story.
yeah,
So, and not only that, I guess having a wolf that can think like a human, or and then they even tried to write it, a human thinking like a wolf,
mm-hmm.
when he's running through the facility, but they didn't really do much of any of that. So I don't know. That part of it I wasn't blown away by. I did enjoy the novel though. So
Yeah, I did too. All in all, I mean, it was a good read. I finished the whole thing. I didn't skip any parts. I didn't, be like, oh, this is boring. I'm gonna just, go ahead.
I
Um,
didn't like the train. I
you
did
didn't
not
like the
like that.
train? I
No,
actually really enjoyed the train
I don't
scene.
get the idea of I mean, it doesn't make sense. Why would the guy just not wait at the first car and let the dude come to you, and then just shoot
Yeah,
him when he walks in the door? I mean, it's not like you can go anywhere. It's like a straight linear path that he had to take, and yet he somehow still failed. The guy
yeah,
that set all the traps and knew where everything was and could leave the car if he wanted to. That's what I don't. I don't get I mean, it's a cool concept, and I
yeah.
thought, okay, I understand some of what we're talking about, but I'm just like, if I was if I was a werewolf, I would just stay there and make him come to me, and then I would eat him as a
Yep.
werewolf.
I would wolf
And
out. Yep.
so that was, and I know the point. The point is to show us how insane and how barbaric and how monstrous each one of these people were that were on the Nazi side, because that guy's an American,
Yeah.
that sided with the Nazis. And I get all that. And you know what? You don't really have to put him on a crazy train for me to know that the guys, I think my least favorite parts were all that, the castle. And it's not that I was, it gave it flavor, gave it some authenticity and stuff, but it's like, you I just I thought that's when he should have wolfed out, and just wiped everybody out in the castle. And
Yeah.
that turns it into a horror novel
Yeah.
where,
That was I had almost forgotten about that. The weird, what was the club called?
Hellfire Club.
Hellfire Club, and they're like weird, what
They
and
had the
ever.
yeah,
The
they had
young girl dancing on glass.
the young Jewish girl dancing
Young
on,
Jewish girl
and then they had
dancing
the
on glass.
midget guy doing weird sex stuff, and then they
Yeah.
had they're torturing these people and
Yeah.
enjoying it. And then and obviously there it's that's horrific, but I think that had more to do with these people simply being monsters than it did with them being, what I mean. I think the Nazis attracted that, they
Yeah.
attracted these insane people. And I don't think that if we go down the whole thing, you know, I know people paint Germany in the broad brush of that, but I'm just like, those have to be special cases. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
every single Nazi was that insane, but it seemed like every Nazi in this book was that insane. So,
Yeah. I
and
actually really like the portrayals of Hitler.
yeah,
They
that
portrayed
was
him
funny.
as really insane with the painting and the wolf and the
Yeah. Well, and I'm pretty sure that's how it was.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think he was an insecure little person who
Yeah.
somehow was able to pull off. That's the horror story right there.
Yeah.
And so, but and I get, that's overdone too. So I can see. But like I said, your main character is a werewolf. Let's do something. Let's celebrate his werewolfness by killing Nazis. And
Hmm.
then it just ended up being not that. So I thought, again, wouldn't have been cool though if they had like some sort. I assume, when you think of the Nazis and all the crazy stuff they were experimenting on, there should have been like a werewolf brigade or something. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that would have been cool to have them match up, and maybe that happens in the second book. Maybe there's a story where he faces off against a werewolf.
Yeah. Maybe.
But yeah, I I'm curious if this got made into some sort of movie or not. It feels like it could have easily been a movie, and I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
why. And without even a werewolf, you could have had a really good movie just as a World War II spy thriller,
Yep.
and you wouldn't have to ever mention the werewolves. I mean, the situation where they get in touch with the artist is really cool. Very intense. Very, when they get Mouse to bump into him and put the note in his pocket.
Hmm.
Um, you have that whole situation, the situation where he flies in to France, parachutes in, and that's the other thing. He's terrified, doesn't want to jump out of the plane in the beginning of the book, and then he's in a plane that is literally falling apart as it's flying, and he doesn't bat an eye.
Yeah.
That didn't make any sense to me either. So I thought there's no way that having two more people with him is going to make him feel that much more comfortable. So I thought he did a disservice with the character at that point, but or maybe he just hoped we forgot that he was terrified to be in a plane to jump out of.
Yeah.
So
And that's another thing. Another point is you'd think for this guy being a werewolf, he would be more, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to
uh
say wimpy because he wasn't wimpy, but just like you said, he was terrified of flying and jumping out of the plane. And then there was another scene where he was like saying how exhausted he was, or
and I wonder if maybe the problem is that because they humanized the character, he showed us he showed us that they had the ability to die very easily.
yeah,
So maybe that takes away the the power and the ability that they have in normal setting, where you would think of them as almost indestructible.
right,
But he comes across as very, like he's very aware that he could die very easily. So
yeah,
maybe that's why he's so hesitant when it comes to doing certain things. But at the very beginning, though, he didn't seem very hesitant at all. He bursts into the Nazi camp. He steals the paperwork. He's running away from them. He's tricking them into shooting at each other, destroying each other, and he gets away with the plans. So I mean, he is brazen. He has that thing. He's not completely, unable to tap into whatever he needs to get to that point. But yeah, you're right. There are so many, and like I said, there's a lot of contradictions throughout the book, and I don't know if we're supposed to take it as growth of the character, because it doesn't seem like enough has happened for him to grow to that
right.
point. So it's a very quick, because I mean, obviously this has to have happened. The majority of it happens within a span of what, you think, a month, a couple months, maybe?
Maybe a couple months because they had the deadline of D-Day,
Right.
so they knew the exact date, so they only had um, a couple days, they had a finite amount of time to get that
But
mission
there's enough time
accomplished.
for him to fly to Norway and all that stuff as he learned more about what was going on.
Yeah,
Now that is something you can say, because really his plan was to go to the whoever the guy was, the guy that they met with, that had the information about the painter. That was all he was supposed to do, and the reason he wanted to do it was so he could get revenge on that other guy. So when he killed
yeah,
the dude in the train, he could have just wiped his hands and said, "I'm done." But I mean, it was good. I mean, it does show that he does have that extra bit of hero still in him to go and finish the job,
finish.
which
Yeah,
he could have easily just given up at that point, especially when they fished him out of the water and then
yeah,
capture him again or whatever. So that was the other thing. They showed us these Nazis that are just completely barbaric and just terrible with every human that they got their hands on. And then they capture Michael and the Goldilocks and Lazarus, and they're not tortured. It's like
Yeah,
they
they were treated
bandaged.
actually pretty well.
And
They
I
were
could
treated.
kind of understand with the girl because they all had, but you would think that they would be that much more enraged that she's been playing them for a fool.
Right.
And so that you would think that they would have taken it out on her. And I don't know if maybe they're saving her for propaganda films because they expected that they would win. They were very excited about bombing London. I really think he thought that would have been the turning point of the war if they were able to get that, especially because of how just amazingly devastating the goo was. The other
Yeah.
thing I didn't like, did you like the fact that they made the scientist a simpleton or whatever they were trying? It's like he was like super smart when it comes to designing gas, and then he was also kind of, you know,
Yeah.
he just wasn't all there.
Yeah, with the thing with the basketball.
Yeah, he learned how. I guess he just recently discovered basketball, so he's making the Jewish prisoners play, and then as they're struggling with it and stuff, he's yelling at them and torturing them and kicking them and making them continue through it all and stuff. But I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, but it was done in a way that it didn't. I guess it was supposed to make it that much more amazing. I don't know, amazing that he could come up with this killer gas
Killer
stuff, or
gas, yeah.
maybe it was just, I guess it was to show us that he was insane. But you know what, he's working with the Nazis, so he kind of got that. I didn't really
You're
need
right.
the other stuff, so I'm like, I don't get. So I didn't like that. I didn't like that totally. I wonder if it's based on a real person, so maybe that's how that person was.
Maybe.
I didn't do any extra digging. So, but I mean, that's a nitpick to go with the metric thing too. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I had
But I just thought
yeah.
it stood out as weird. I'm like, yeah, just everything about it. And then how, I mean, I get the other guy was more like a cat with a mouse, the block.
Mm,
He was always playing games with them. He always felt he was one step ahead of them,
right.
even when Michael would like mention stuff like Iron Fist and stuff. And so he knew Michael was in the know a little bit.
Right.
Um, but he was almost too Nazi general. He was like, just, I don't know. It felt like Dr. Evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Scott, it's like, hey man, I got a gun in the other room. Just
Yeah.
I'll go get the gun. We can shoot him together. And then
Yeah.
we don't have to worry about any of this. But they just kept, like it kept them all alive. It's like
Yep.
very convenient for Michael. They kept the two pilots alive
Mm-hmm.
because then they could fly and then do what they needed to destroy the goo.
Yeah.
So if we
Would
took
I?
the
Yeah.
werewolf out, if we take the werewolf out and say this is a story about a guy who's parachuting in and he's trying to help the Allies, fantastic story.
Mm-hmm.
Werewolf in it, I'm fine. I didn't have a problem when he turns into werewolf to escape when they're in France. I wish there would have been way more of it. I did get a little tired of him constantly having to fight the change,
Yeah.
especially as long as it took him to embrace the change. I really thought that they missed the opportunity, like you said, that first story with Mikhail. It would have been really cool to see where they were going with the baby.
Mm-hmm.
For them to go that much in depth, for that much of that story to be focused on him being successful in fathering a child that turns into a werewolf. There's a werewolf story I want to read.
Right.
Give me
Yep.
a 3-year-old that turns into a werewolf when he's upset. I mean, come on, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. I would read that.
yeah, and so maybe I'll go and I'll look to see what the stories are about, and maybe I will change my mind about reading the sequel. If somebody told me, suggested, hey, can you suggest a good werewolf book? Never will I suggest this book.
No.
If somebody says, hey, can you tell me a book that's really cool set in World War II that's kind of like a Tarantino film, maybe, or you know what I mean, a little alt
Mm-hmm.
history, here you go. In
Yep.
fact, I don't even know. Maybe we had a werewolf on our side. So I don't even know if this is alt history. But I would be like, yeah, I got a book for you. You
Yep.
can read, check out Fatherland. Let's read, and then Wolf's Hour. and let's and then you can have a nice look at this other stuff. But I'm shocked at when I got to the end, and I thought, wow, I am shocked that we're going to be talking in our horror series
Yeah.
about a book that I don't find. I mean, and I'm Mr. Everything is horror. I can
Hmm.
find horror in anything you hand me, and the horror in this book is not the werewolf, though; it's the Nazis, and that goes without saying. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. I wish I could. And then the funny thing is it sounds like we're walking away from this and we're saying this is a bad book, but this is one of the best books we've read
Yep.
on the series. So I don't have a problem with the book. I'm just a little disappointed that I don't have more werewolf eating people. And
Yep.
they were not shy about eating people. So there is no reason why he shouldn't have been eating Nazis left and right.
Right. Yeah, because that's pretty much all they did
Yeah,
in
when
the,
they were the other thing, they were like, "Hey, humans, let's go." And I
yep.
guess they kind of did when he's healing with the other
Hmm.
wolves. They're in Wolf Town or Wolf City. There's the other thing. The cat character did not like her at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like why do you have
Kitty.
a Kitty,
Kitty. Yeah.
crazy Norwegian with a knife.
Who can't talk
Yeah,
really or talks
and
gibberish. And it kind of cracked me up too when he was describing her, because he like described her as like a blob or like a mountain, but she was like 6 foot something and 250 pounds. I'm like, someone who is 6 foot, I think she was like 6'4" at 250 pounds would not be a blob. They would
yeah,
actually be pretty thin, pretty skinny, you know? Like, I
yeah,
know it's unusual for women to be that tall, so I get that part of his description of her, but for him to add the other, 250 pounds,
yeah.
yeah, but
There's
she's
a good
over.
chance 250. Most of it's. I guess maybe she let herself go, and so he's trying to make it sound like she is. But yeah, you're right. The weight doesn't work there.
Yeah,
Um, she
he
was
could have.
comedy. She was comedy relief in the most tragic of ways, because of her backstory.
Yeah.
And then, and you didn't need her because you had Lazarus, who provided just as much of that
Yep.
lightness that you kind of need in a story like this. You do need those characters, but I just felt
Hmm.
like it was heavy handed at the end right there. Um, I don't know. I wish again, a great book, but I mean, it's like if I do feel like we're at a funeral right now,
Yeah.
I don't want to upset everybody that loves the book because I enjoyed it. I thought it was a
Yeah.
good book, but I don't enjoy I mean,
No,
this
not a
isn't a
werewolf
werewolf
book.
book. I mean, yeah, I mean, I just don't get it. It's like,
Yeah.
he could have been anything.
Yeah. He could have been a vampire, like you said. He could have been a warlock,
Yeah, I
He
mean,
could
that
have.
would have been interesting. Let's
Yeah.
give me a warlock in World War II doing stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is that maybe we didn't have a big enough villain, even though we did. I mean, honestly, with the villain, the evil was
Yeah.
big enough, but he didn't have a physical. I mean, I guess Boots. They tried to build Boots up pretty big, but didn't he dispatch Boots like in a sentence or something? It just felt like he was through Boots like that. We're
Yeah.
done. And then he kills he kills all the bad guys, but it's like I don't know. None of it was like, yeah, there we go. Like, hey, that's real, some werewolf revenge. I just didn't get any of that feeling.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess in a way I was disappointed in that portion, but I'm not upset that I read it. In fact, I really did enjoy it to the point where if I had free time, I would read one of the next ones that he wrote just to get
Yeah.
some more because I really did enjoy the way his style. I did enjoy his
Yeah.
style. It's
I did
it's
too.
it's
Yeah.
obvious to see why people love him.
Yeah.
I think he's a good writer. I think this was, and you know what? We read the other books first, and maybe we build to this, and then we're like, oh, this is genius.
Hmm.
Again, 1989, 95, 2001. We read it, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. But I've seen a werewolf fight Nazis in the the Fable storyline in Vertigo. You know, they have the big bad wolf. What was
Right.
that? And so, you know, I've already seen this where the allies have a werewolf, and he actually werewolfed out and killed a whole bunch of people and all their stuff. So, uh, you know,
Yeah.
and then I read this, I'm thinking, oh, this isn't even holding a candle to anything. So,
Yeah. I was disappointed because, like you said, there wasn't a lot of werewolf. I enjoyed the book. It's not going to stop me from reading more McCammon at all. And not just because I already have books of his, because let me tell you, if I find an author that I don't like, if I had more books by them, I don't keep them. But I am going to read more from McCammon because, as you said, it was a well-written book. Um, it just was two different stories. Um, and I was just not as blown away as I expected to be. Because,
yeah,
like
and
you
you know
said,
what?
everybody was like, "Oh, that's such a great book. That's like the best book." Um,
So
but
we can blame them for this.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, and maybe part of it's, you know, we watched Dog Soldiers right before we jumped into it, and or while we were in it, you know, and so Dog Soldiers is such a fun. I just think that's the problem is that maybe can you imagine if we started with this and then
mm,
worked our way through the other books, we might have a different thought, you know.
yeah,
But when we have that flavor of that of the howling, even Stephen and I know, you know, Cycle of the Werewolf. I mean, there's nothing there. I mean, he really is just. I mean, it's a very short idea, you know. It's not fleshed out at all. I think there's so much more he could have done with Cycle, but that
oh, for
werewolf
sure.
is impressive. It's an impressive, horrific thing, and that's the other problem is that we think of werewolves usually as the bad guy themselves. So when you put the werewolf on the good side of the good guys, maybe he just was having too difficult of a time finding the right mixture, you know. And so instead of giving us werewolf action 24/7, you know, he kept him a man more often, and then used the struggle as the thing that he propelled the story with.
Yeah,
But you know, I mean, that's in my mind that's kind of boring. So,
hmm,
but I did enjoy it as a spy thriller because I thought there was
yeah,
some cool stuff. But again, a lot of it we've seen in other movies or read in other books and stuff. So I didn't think there was anything, you know, super original. Um, So I don't know. I don't know what else
yeah,
to say other than we're gonna read another book. So
yep. So yeah, so the covers we have, I think we both have this cover.
yeah, and I think that
Um,
cover is really cool. If I saw that
yeah,
cover in a thing, I would have immediately grabbed it. And I was so
yep,
excited when I saw Anna post that she had a copy when she was going through and she's selling some of her stuff. And so I immediately was like, I gotta have that one because
right.
I knew we were going to build up to it because we were talking about doing werewolves, and so you know I was super excited, and then uh, you know, and then this happened.
Yeah.
Um,
So then we have the same cover, just different color scheme.
Yeah, and it kind of has more of that ball feel because I have the ball cover and it looks
Yes.
just like this. You know, it's
Yes.
the eyes and the sky and it's got the bluish color
Hmm.
and stuff. And I
Yeah.
think I like this as much as the other cover, maybe a little bit more actually. You know, I kind of like the contrast.
Yeah.
But I mean, both of these are instant. You see this cover, you're buying it. You don't have to see the name of the author. If you just saw the art and the name of the book, you would buy it based on
Yeah.
this.
And I think from all the covers I've seen of his books, they all look similar. So he must have had the same cover artist
It's
do them.
funny because if you look, he has it in groups. You know, like, hey, this is when I first did my books, and then there's like 10 that look the same, and then you can see where a new publisher or the same publisher decided we've got to have new covers, and then they all look the same. And then
Mm.
it's like another 5 years later, and then they all look the same. Unfortunately, we're going to get to one of those patterns, and it breaks my heart to
Oh,
see this as a cover. I thought this was a pretty good one too.
yeah.
This right here screams World War II thriller to me. You
Hmm.
know, like a espionage kind of James Bond kind of.
Hmm.
You know, but you still get the werewolf. In fact,
The
so
Wolfman.
much so that everything else is gone. And so then I'm even more pissed after I read this, you know, with this cover because I didn't get it
Hmm.
as much werewolf. And maybe I guess we're supposed to just eat up the him turning into a werewolf as a kid but I didn't find that. I mean, I enjoyed the story, but I didn't find it as
Right.
fulfilling for as an entire meal. If this was
Right.
presented to us,
Yeah.
we're missing something. Okay,
This is a pretty cool one.
this is I got in. I know I think I've explained before how I read. I like to read in the book form, but when
Hmm.
I am pressed for time or whatever, I will jump on the Kindle and get a book, especially if I can get it on Prime or something, and read it at night so I don't turn the light on, so I don't bother Dawn. So, so I have to have it on a Kindle. So I knew I was struggling to find time to sit down with the paperback. And I noticed that it was on sale. So I bought it on the Kindle. This is the cover.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
and so I was like you said, this is an awesome cover because it even kind of, it kind of gives you that hint of, hey, without coming out and saying werewolf, you have an idea of, oh, maybe this is something. Maybe the guy talks to wolves, maybe the guy's a werewolf, whatever. And you have enough of everything to get an idea of Nazis and war and everything else. I think it's a pretty cool cover.
Yeah, I like it. The audio book,
This
yeah,
this is a series of paperbacks too, though, and he did it to all of his books. It's a stupid color splash, and it looks like everything's underwater, and they all are like that. And
yeah,
if I would be beside myself. I would be like, I cannot believe this is what y'all came up with in the art department. And unfortunately, this is what, and I don't know what time period this falls under. I think it's probably more recent, but that's where a lot of covers are going to. I really miss the 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 old 80s, 70s and 80s covers. Every
yeah,
time we do this, those are almost always the best. And that's what I love about indie, horror is the covers. They just, they go the extra mile. They give us that flair, that
hmm,
flavor from the old days. This annoys me
yeah,
to no end. If I saw this, no, I wouldn't even stop. I would just keep swiping. I would have no desire to even to learn what this is about, even though you would hope his name would stop you.
right,
But if I didn't know who he was, I would be like, man, this guy didn't even try.
yeah,
That's what I would think. This is terrible. This and the fact that he has all of his books with this cover, I could imagine if I went online and you know how sometimes you order a book through Amazon and you don't know what cover you're going to get, you're just ordering a used book.
yeah,
I would send it back every time if it was one of these covers.
yeah,
I would be devastated.
yeah. That's not cool at all. Now
I
this is
yeah,
pretty cool.
I thought this was really cool, and I'm assuming maybe it's a hardcover
Mm, yeah, maybe.
because it kind of has that look to it. But man, this is my favorite by far.
Yeah,
I love and I love the fact that we're getting more representation of what he really is as a wolf, because he's not aware, as becoming the
yeah,
wolf itself, and because that wolf right there is terrifying.
yep,
And the fact that you can kind of and you really wouldn't be able to tell just from that. You might think that maybe the wolf is on the other side, but I thought this was cool. This was my favorite cover by far, but I love our cover too.
yeah, yeah. This one was really when I was going through when you sent me the images, I was like, whoa, I've never seen that before.
Yeah,
Um,
I
I
was
know. I
shocked when I
think
came
this.
across it.
Yeah, I think though this one would be all as much of a disappointment just because of this blurb right here. One man's deadly power to hunt to kill
Right.
um, makes you think that once again there's going to be more wolf. But
Yeah.
it is a very eye-catching. I would pick that up in a heartbeat
Yeah,
if I
I
saw
could
that.
see this at the library with that plastic wrap around the cover,
Yeah.
like you get. And yeah, I could see it right there. And that would be a beeline straight towards it, when it's on the shelf or whatever
Hmm.
when they're doing their thing. Or at the bookstore, however you want to do it. But I can just picture it in that old school library plastic that you get with the hardcovers when you go
Yep.
to check them out. Yeah, I know. I don't know what else to say. I think we've beaten this one down. So
Yeah. So I'll just end with saying it was an enjoyable book. I don't regret reading it. Will I read it again? Probably not.
yeah, I have
Um,
no reason to read it
yeah.
again. I gave it
Um,
4 stars on Goodreads. and I will on Amazon, So I think it's a 4-star, which is a fantastic book.
Hmm.
But for it's just not, it's not a werewolf book.
Just not a werewolf book.
Nope.
Nope. Now it's time for our Not Stephen King book of the week. And we are going over Beast of Sorrows by James Watts. I have to tell you, this was a really good book. And I just said, again. So I bought this last year. This is the original cover. This is the Terror Tract edition of this book. The new cover here is it's been re-released through Sinister Smile Press. So this here is the one on the screen is the new cover. And I got to tell you, this book is fantastic. It has demons, it has werewolves, it has vampires. There's just all kinds of stuff going on in this book. It was amazing. And you just can't help but fall in love with the characters. At least I did anyways. Benny, goes to this small town. He's kind of like wandering around and, living a nomad life, and he ends up in Jericho Hills. But come to find out, he's not there by mistake. And my cat's making weird things happen to my screen because she's playing with my mouse. And it just culminates in this like battle. The character shown here on the book cover is Bex, and she's this demon girl who has like a pet spirit werewolf. And there's this like pack of werewolves in this town that are trying to kill the demon, and the demon's after Benjamin. And then one of the people who used to be in the werewolf pack is now a vampire. It was phenomenal.
See,
It
and I
was,
think,
yeah,
especially after reading what we just said wasn't very werewolfy, this sounds like it's drenched in werewolf. And so that sounds really cool.
yeah.
Uh,
You
what I
don't get a lot of like werewolves running around killing people. It's mostly like it starts off and you think it's only going to be about this demon girl and her pet spirit werewolf, but then the story like keeps going on. And the reason she is after Benjamin is because somehow he took some of her power. So he's got this power that he doesn't know what to do with. And you think it's just about this demon girl, but then the story gets deeper and you find out there's like this centuries old thing between the werewolves and the demon girl. And then yeah, it's just fantastic book. And I'm really mad at myself that it took me over a year to read it. Because I
Well, I
bought
know
this.
I was impressed because, I had heard good things, and then I knew it was about a werewolf or had werewolves in it. So, and I suggested maybe we make it one of the books of the week. And you're like, okay, I'll read it. And then you like burned through it. I mean, I was very impressed as I
Yep.
struggled through Wolf's Hour, and just time's sakes, you know.
Yep.
But I was like, yeah, that's amazing. I was happy you were able to finish it so that we could give it a true, because that's what we like to do. At least that one of us have read the book when we
Right.
suggest it. We're not up here just suggesting stuff to suggest stuff. We want you to find new non-Stephen King books to broaden your horizon, but we don't want it to be crappy experience. So
Yep.
I was excited that because as you finished it, you sent me that message saying how great it was, and I
Yeah.
thought, okay, this is perfect. It's perfect timing for us to throw it into the fray since we're focusing on werewolves for the next
Yeah.
couple weeks.
And there is a mention in this book of the Sallow Men, which I know James is actually working on that book currently. That's his current work in progress. Some of the characters are going to get their a sequel, kind of, because there's the Beast of Sorrows, but then there's these characters. The main character here, Bex, the little demon girl, she's part of the Sisters of Sorrow. So he's thinking about expanding on them because there's, 2 more left. I like this cover, the Terror Tract cover. because this is Bex on the cover, but this one is more representative of how she's described in the book. This girl, you can't really tell, she doesn't look as young and she doesn't have red hair, but the actual character in the book has red hair and she wears pigtails. So I think whoever, decided to redesign the cover and make the cover image more representative of Bex did a really good job.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's definitely a really great book. And I had reached out to James as well, and I'm like, I gotta tell you, I just finished that and I really loved it. It was just fun because you get everything. Like, it's not just a straightforward werewolf book. You get everything.
Very cool
In this book. Yeah.
Well, everybody needs to put it on their TBR.
Yep.
It's on mine, so hopefully I'll get to it.
Yeah, we'll have the links down in the description to where you can get it on Amazon. Check it out. And I'm looking forward to reading Salomon, and I'm really hoping that James gets the sequels done in the next couple years or year or so. I know he's a slower writer, but
life gets in the way.
Life gets in the way. You got a job, you got family, so I'll be patient. James, I will read it no matter when you put it out.
Very cool.